Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at turbotax.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have flown under the radar and passed most people by. I am your host, Derek McDuff, and joining me today, I've got a special guest. He's an actor. You might have seen him on The Good Place as Donkey Doug, born and raised down here in SoCal, just like me, Mitch Narito. How's it going, Mitch?
What's up, man? How's it going? Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. We had gotten some drinks at Comic-Con and talked about having you on. So I was like, you know what? I'm excited to do this, and we're making it happen. And pitched you the show, and I'd asked you what film you want to talk about, and you had said The Rundown.
Yep.
So I'm very excited to talk about that. Before we get into it, though, is there anything else you wanted to let the people know about you?
I do comedy every so often. If you guys want to follow me on my Instagram, that's where I'm most active. I do have a Threads too. Both are at Mitch Narito. So yeah, if you guys want to give me a follow, I got shows and different things going on every so often. So if you want to just keep tabs on things, you can follow me on those.
Yeah, a very good follow, I will say.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So speaking of The Rundown, this is always a movie that I had known. It was kind of always one of those movies that was on FX or something. It was like early 2000s, just like action movie, and I was always aware of it, and it was always just kind of there in the periphery, but I'd never actually seen it. So when you suggested it, I was like, okay, this will be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So
what do you think?
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I'm a big Pete Berg fan. Peter Berg, the director, obviously started as an actor, but I think he's got a real knack for action films. Obviously, this is like the early era of Dwayne Johnson, before he was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, or Dwayne Johnson. He was just credited as The Rock, and like WWE films. And I think this is right after The Mummy Returns, so this is early The Rock, and then Sean William Scott. Big fan of his, and then you got a menacing Chris Walken and a great Rosario Dawson. I was having a fun time with it. What about this movie drew you to be the one that we would cover here on Underrated?
So this movie came out in 2003. I didn't see it when it first came out. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
And then I was one of those people that would always look through the bargain bins at Walmart or Target or whatever, just to see what DVDs were out. And The Rundown was one of those movies that always popped up.
Right.
And so I picked it up for whatever it was, $5 or whatever. And I would watch it, and I just really liked it. I ended up really liking the story. I'm a big fan of Rosario Dawson. I always think she's awesome in whatever she does. And old school Chris Walken is in this movie. There are moments in the movie where he pokes fun at himself. And I was just like, this is great. Sean William Scott, surprisingly funny in this. He's known for his comedy from American Pie and whatnot. And just in this, it was just one of those old school buddy movies that I hadn't really experienced since the 90s or whatever. There was a big lull for me, for buddy comedy or buddy cop or whatever you want to categorize as that. So And funny enough, like my day job, I'm a teacher. I teach English as a second language to adults.
Very cool.
And this is one of those movies that I can show to my students and not worry about like it being too graphic or too
Mm,
sexual or anything like that. And everyone relates to it. And that's how I figured out. It's like, oh, this is a good movie. Like it just has mass appeal.
mm.
It just resonates with a lot of people, and it's very straightforward. The action is done well. The story is not so bad, and it's just a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on a lot of things that I really agree with. This feels just like it's not like a game changing crazy movie. It's just like,
Hmm.
here's a competently made, fun action adventure movie that isn't trying to, like, it's not based on anything. It's not setting up for a sequel. It's
Hmm.
just, here's some guys going on an adventure in the jungle. And I feel like that's something we've seen less and less and less of as the years have gone on, but it's a lot of fun. I think there's a reason it became a staple for those FX and TNTs, and like, although it's just kind of like one of those movies you're flipping channels, like, oh yeah, I'll watch a little bit of the rundown. Like, okay, they're doing some jungle adventures, they're doing some jungle action. I love that you brought up just Walken kind of making fun of himself, because one of my
Hmm.
notes I took when I was watching it was how good that Tooth Fairy scene is, where he's just,
Yeah, yeah,
Fairy, I feel like a kid, and he's just like doing his
yeah.
whole walking thing, and he's like, explain the Tooth Fairy to them. It just really does a good job of towing that line between, okay, like, it's not necessarily comedy. Sean William Scott, like you mentioned, is more of a comedian, but it's funny. It's got like these really funny beats and moments in it, and it's not a huge like Mission Impossible action movie,
Hmm.
but it's got some real good shot on location action stuff in this that I really appreciated, especially after, like, now everything's shot on the volume or whatever, and which is cool. Like, I don't hate
Hmm.
that, but it was like, okay, cool. They went to the jungle and shot this movie. So I
Yeah.
I really I really appreciated that.
No, it just and the guy, I forgot his name. He plays Declan. He's the pilot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like one of the reasons like I love this movie is because like the first couple times I saw this movie, I could not understand that guy
Yeah.
whatsoever. Like I would have to put on subtitles and be like, "Is that what he's saying?" And like he's just a
Mhm.
fun character. Like in general, like all the entire cast, they created really good characters, like really believable characters, and it's like reminiscent of like the old school Indiana Jones movies, like
Mhm.
that I love so much. And then like you could see its influence in like The Rock's performances and stuff later on, like in Jumanji and stuff.
Mhm.
Like it's very similar. Like I felt like Jumanji was kind of like a very kid friendly, watered down version of the Rundown. So
Yeah.
there's a little grime, there's a little grit to the movie that I appreciate. And you mentioned Peter Berg, and I was watching something on Netflix today as American Primeval,
Okay, yeah.
and I was watching it. I was like, these action scenes in this are intense. Like, why does this seem so familiar? And then at the end of the first episode, his name pops up, and I was like, oh, what a crazy coincidence! That's wild.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. Like, not all of his movies hit, but I think that he always at least understands the assignment. Where he's a director who is both, obviously, him being an actor, is an actor's director. I think he works really well with these casts, these ensembles. He gets very good performances out of people. And like we said, this is really the Rock's first starring role. He basically just
Hmm.
shows up to be in the prologue and then as a CGI monster in The Mummy Returns. This
Yeah,
is like The Rock actually doing some real acting, and he gets a good performance. There's a
yeah,
reason The Rock has become an actor. Obviously, he was acting in the WWE, but this is an entirely different animal.
yeah, yeah.
And
He still
yeah,
has hair in this movie,
yeah,
so
it's so weird. Just like, oh yeah, he's got the like cropped down, like with a very short buzz, but you're like, yeah, he still has his hair. But he also is somebody who really understands how to shoot action very well. This
mhm,
movie looks good. It's very competently shot and choreographed, where you always understand the geography of what's going on. And I think part of that is, once again, you're shooting on a physical place. You can go to different places and reference different things. Like when you're
mhm,
shooting here, you're like, okay, well, this angle, rather than being like, okay, theoretically, where are we at the volume? But he is somebody who really gets how to place a camera in a certain way and make things look cool. There's that moment, which I had seen the moment before in the there's that, like, from a few years back, that Will Ferrell bit where he's like, "Cool guys don't look at explosions." It's that like
Yeah,
fake
yeah,
music
yeah.
video, and you see The Rock kind of just like going, and there's this big explosion happening behind him, and then you have
Yeah.
the same thing happen with Sean William Scott. He's just like falling on the deck. I thought
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was, but I didn't see the Sean William Scott part of that before. I thought that was so good, and it just really encapsulated these characters and their dynamic, which I thought was a really fun one. I love a good two-hander like that, you know,
Mhm.
like a good buddy movie, good buddy adventure. Here we're going. Like I saw somebody had written a letterbox review that it said was bromancing the stone. I thought that was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, yeah.
funny.
That's a good like that's accurate, I feel. And like another thing that I love about this movie is that there's another Filipino in it. There's Ernie Reyes Jr.
Oh, nice.
He's like the in the rebel army. He's the guy
Mhm.
who takes on the Rock, and he actually wins up against him. And that's what I thought was awesome because like the Rock is such a big person, you know. And
Mhm.
then like you have Ernie Reyes, where he's like he's like almost half his size, but in the movie he's vicious, you know. Like
Yeah,
he takes him on, and like he ends up showing the Rock a thing or two. And I was like, hey, you know, representation. Like even though Ernie
nice.
Reyes plays like a Brazilian or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it works. You know, like I'll take it. I'll take it.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Welcome to the White Lotus in Thailand, Kat.
It's a wellness center.
You should get a facial. The lady in the airport thought you were my dad.
My God.
The Emmy Award-winning HBO original series returns.
There has been more crime on the island.
Oh, I'm a little freaked out. What happens in Thailand stays in Thailand. Oh, what does that mean? It means we're not dead yet.
Amen.
Amen.
A new season of the HBO original series The White Lotus premieres February 16th at 9 p.m. on Max.
Yeah. No, that was a cool fight scene because yeah, it's one of those things like, okay, The Rock is so huge and intimidating, how do you effectively make an action scene with him where you are like, okay, this guy might lose, he's gonna be in danger maybe. In one ways, you can do it like the end where it's like him versus 1,000 guys,
Mhm.
but in other ways, you can have him fight a different kind of fighter. Like I always
Yeah.
think of Princess Bride when Wesley has to beat Andre the Giant, and how does he do it? He's got to like, okay, I'm gonna come at him from this angle, I'm gonna do this thing. It was kind of the same thing where he's like swooping in and jumping down and slashing him, and The Rock is kind of just big and bulky, and he's just kind of pivoting from side to side. So I appreciated that. Once again, I think really good action cinematography. I wanted to ask you being an actor, what did you think about the performances in this film?
I thought that, and that's one of the other reasons I love this movie. Like, this is like you said, this is before Rock. The Rock, like he kind of like found that formula, like
Mm-hmm.
because like I hate to say it, but nowadays like he's always kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
He knows what to do. He's very polished, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, like it's very rough, right? Like you could tell like he's trying to prove himself in this movie
Mm-hmm.
because like he's up with people that have been in multiple other things at this point. You have Rosario Dawson, Christopher Walken, Sean William Scott he was big in
Yeah.
the early 2000s, like
Yeah.
he was doing tons of things, and like you have this entertainer who may not necessarily be as seasoned as everybody else, but he's holding his own, right? Sean William Scott, I thought was, like it was a good change of pace from him being like the typical goofball, like
Mm-hmm.
there's like a moment in the movie where he takes off his shirt and you're just like, oh, this guy's ripped. He took this seriously, right? Like
Yeah.
you mentioned Chris Walken, the Tooth Fairy, is great. Like especially because like in that scene he has a translator and like he's still going off and like everyone's looking at him like he's crazy because they don't understand him, and he's
Yeah.
trying to get his translator to explain, tell him what the Tooth Fairy is, like you said, like let him know. You guys
Yeah.
get my tooth back.
It's a tooth, and she leaves your quarter. She takes the tooth. Ah.
Yeah, it's like you know what I'm talking about. Like it's great. And then like he has his typical Walkenisms. Like when there's one where I think it's this is not a spoiler because this movie's like almost
Yeah.
20 something
We
years
can
old.
spoil it. Yeah.
But like, at one point the Rock shoots the gun out of Walken's hand, and Walken replies with like a wow, like it's like one of those. It's like,
Yeah.
so it's really good, and like Rosario Dawson, like she's confident, she's sexy, she's and she's the good guy. She's the voice of reason in this, and it's great.
Right.
Like I said, like all the people in this movie, like even the other people I haven't mentioned, they're just they bought into it. I guess like I have to attribute that to the direction. I thought Peter Berg really did an excellent job of handling like what he had and knowing how to put it all together. So I just thought that was it may not have broken like records or anything, but it is a solid movie. There's not like there wasn't like a ton of like moments where I'm like, oh, that's weird, or there's a plot hole there or whatever, Like I was like, I'll buy it. I'll suspend disbelief for long enough and I will enjoy this, Like it's something that I can watch all the time, Like it's always fun to watch.
Yeah, it's the word that I would use to most describe this movie is solid. Here's like a movie that just doesn't do anything necessarily crazy or extraordinary, but it works on every level. Everything works, and there's a reason I think it's become that staple of late night viewing and stuff like that, of the DVD bins, and it hasn't just kind of been forgotten to history. That despite it doing pretty poorly at the box office, I think it barely made its budget back, or even maybe didn't even do that. So kind of fell off, and it's not necessarily one. There's a reason we're covering it on Underrated. It's not necessarily one that I think is going to be in the Academy Museum or something like that. But it's a movie that people remember. It's a movie that I've always been like, oh yeah, The Rundown. Maybe I'll watch that at some point. Just never gotten around to it. But it's a movie people know, people remember, and people, I think, generally, I think that they enjoy for the most part, or if they don't, maybe they should a little more. And hopefully after this episode, maybe some more people will go back to it and we're like, oh, I haven't watched that movie since 2004. Maybe I'll go back and check it out. But yeah, it's just, I think you need movies like this that are like, because it touches on a lot of the same themes as something like, say, Blood Diamond, where it's like, okay, you have this movie where it's like set in, in Blood Diamond's Africa, here it's South America, but it's set in this part of the world that is being taken advantage of by these big corporations and stuff like that. There's these people who live there who are just indigenous to the land that are being taken over by like North Americans and like Europeans coming to the land and exploiting them for their labor so they can export gold or diamonds or whatever it might be. And Blood Diamond, I love that movie. It's a great movie. You need to have for every heat, you need to have a den of thieves, right? You need to have this is just kind of the, like, we're talking about the same stuff, it's important stuff, but this movie's kind of fun at the same time. There's gonna be a scene where The Rock is like tripping balls, eating like a paella or whatever, whatever the thing is with the cake. Like, you need to have a little bit of levity. You need to have both. I think both are important. It can't all be Blood Diamonds. You need some rundowns too,
but like, definitely, like, Blood Diamond is a good movie, but that's not something where like, you know what, I feel like I want to sit down and watch Blood Diamond, like The Rundown is one of those movies where, like I said, I mentioned before, like I teach adults, and like one of the things I do to help them learn, I'm like, hey, watch movies, listen to music, like in English, it'll help you pick up stuff faster. And throughout the years, I've learned there are certain movies that like, they may be critically acclaimed and, like they may have won a bunch of awards. And I'm just like, okay, let's see how, my class reacts to it. Right. And a lot of those times, like they're not into it, like they get bored, they don't understand it. But there's like certain movies like The Rundown where I can put on. It doesn't matter how old it is or whatever, like it's engaging and it's enjoyable, like, and everyone, it's easy to follow, and that's big, like without necessarily like talking down to the audience or like spoon feeding them, like this is something that is easy to follow and you just get it, and that's why it's like it's so underrated. I feel.
I completely agree with that. I think that's very well put. This movie feels like, it is obviously like an early 2000s movie. Like it's very, you can tell the way it was when it came out just by looking at the way it was like shot and stuff like that. But it also feels like it harkens back to a lot of those kind of like 80s classic movies of like, I think the closest thing we have to an 80s action star is probably Dwayne Johnson because
Mhm.
he's like in that mold of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sly Stallone's, where he's just like a shit brick house. Like he's just a fucking
Yeah.
big dude, you know. And that's why he's like now he's kind of become that role of like, hey, like he's winking at the camera. He's got his rock persona. This was really
Yeah.
before that. He's still, like you said, this is him really kind of getting his feet wet and doing something new. But it's like, okay, in a lot of those 80s movies, you had like the big guy, and then you had like the kind of like comic relief, and they're going and running
Yeah.
around. And Pete Berg obviously understands that and is really translating that into, you know, at the time a modern lens. And it's maybe we should go back to make some movies like this where it's just like, hey, this is just a fun action adventure, because that's honestly one of my favorite genres ever is action adventure
Yeah.
movies. So it was really cool to step into this world.
No, like looking at this movie, you know, like watching this movie, this is the type of project that I would like love to work on, you know, like so it's like you'd fly me out to an exotic location. I'd get to have a ton of fun doing like wild things, you know, like just experiencing something completely different. This, you know, like this would be a dream, you know, like if I could land
Mhm.
something like this, you know, like I'd love that. I'd love that opportunity.
Yeah. This honestly, I did a little bit of acting back in the day, and this would
Mhm.
be really fun to go and get to do this movie. You know, it seems like everybody involved had a really good time. Yeah, this was a good one. You know, before we wrap up, any final thoughts on the rundown?
Oh no, I just like if you guys haven't seen it or if it's been a while, like it's on I believe it's on Hulu? No. It's on one of the streaming services.
Right.
I know
Yeah.
it is. But like I would say like if you could find it, like dust it off, you'll like it's kind of like a little time capsule because you get to see like we mentioned,
Yeah. Very
like
much so.
you know Rock is young, you know. Sean William Scott's still pretty young and whatnot, and it's something that like it's a popcorn movie. It's a definite popcorn movie. Like you'll enjoy yourself.
hmm
Like you'll end the movie and you'll feel like okay, that was worth the investment of time. You know what I mean? It's not like you know some other movies where it's like I'll never get those 2 hours or whatever back and whatnot. You know?
Right. Yeah, and it's you know it's like a clean like 140. You know, so it's just like all right, you just throw it on, watch it for a little bit, and then cool, you have the rest of your day. It's not like a movie which is good, The Brutalist or something, where it's like 3.5 hours, and it's like all right, like that's the whole investment. You're like okay, cool, this is a good movie to kind of just jump into. But yeah, you said it's a popcorn movie. It really is, you know, in the vein of like kind of these great adventure films. My last question for you is:
Mhm.
do you have any other recommendations for like good popcorn action adventure flicks that people should maybe check out?
Oh man, I have tons. So like the original Blade is a
Mm,
classic, right?
nice. Yeah.
That there's a lot of like I'm a big martial arts fan, so
Mm,
I watched I grew up on Jackie Chan and
nice.
Jet Li. So like for Jackie Chan movies, like you know everyone knows Rumble in the Bronx. One of my personal favorites is Mr. Nice Guy. If you haven't seen it,
Okay, I need to check it out. Yeah,
yeah, Super Cop is really cool. You know, like that has Michelle Yeoh in it too.
nice. I always think of what's it? Not Shaun of the Dead. Hot Fuzz was like Super Cop, the cop that can't be stopped.
Yeah. No, yeah, and like those movies, like, dude, any of the Cornetto trilogy, you know,
Yeah.
like that's all good. You know, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz. What was the last one? What was the in the
Oh,
trilogy?
The World's End.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That The World's End. I remember seeing that in theaters, and my like it was at the Vista before it got renovated. Do you know the
Hmm.
Vista?
Yeah.
And I remember we had gone in, and like the Vista was one of those places. Like a couple years ago, you could bring your own alcohol, right? And so when we were watching World's End, we were trying to keep up. Like so, every time they hit a new pub, like we take a drink, right?
Amazing. Yeah.
Like needless to say, like I don't remember the end of the movie. Like I had to go when I rewatched it, I was like, I
Hmm.
do not remember what happened at the end of this movie. So that's a fun one. Yeah, just like I love like I love action like that. Like there
Hmm.
hasn't been like a ton of stuff in recent years. Like the last one that I thought was kind of cool was it The Fall Guy? It's the Ryan Gosling
Oh
movie.
yeah. That this definitely gave me vibes of that. Yeah, the Fall
Yeah.
Guy. Yeah.
So the Fall Guy is really good. Like, is it, it's just like old school action,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like along those lines, like you were mentioning, like The Rock is one of, like, it would be like, this generation's 80s action hero.
Mm-hmm.
I like John Cena. Like, he does a lot of good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
It's not a movie, but like Peacemaker is
Oh,
great,
yeah,
is a
yeah.
great series.
Yeah.
But John Cena, like, he does solid work, and nowadays I kind of do prefer him over Dwayne Johnson,
Yeah,
just
same here.
because like he does more interesting work, I feel. So yeah.
Yeah, and like with Cena, it's interesting because both these actors kind of came out of the WWE and had been doing like these rundown-esque movies for a while, and The Rock kind of like went out of his lane a little bit, I feel like, in the middle of his career, doing stuff like Pain and Gain, which is a movie I'll probably cover at some point. I love that movie. But Cena, I think, kind of got like weirder and funnier, and I think he's one of the few guys, at least in this role, where he's okay with making fun of himself, and he's okay with like being the idiot. And you hear all this stuff about like all this in the Fast and Furious movies. There's all the feuds because everybody has to have the exact same amount of punches and like has to win the fight. John Cena will like, get his ass kicked and look like a moron and say something dumb, like, and that's why I love Cena. I'm a very big fan of his and all the stuff that he's been doing recently.
Did you watch Jackpot on Amazon by any chance?
No, I heard good things about it though. What did you think?
Okay, so it's a wild movie. Like, the premise is good. There's a few things in execution that could have been better.
Yeah.
But like I really do feel that he was the saving grace of that movie.
Okay.
Because it has Awkwafina in it. She's okay in the movie, but like it's very campy. It's very campy because the premise is like, in the future in Southern California, there's a lottery, but if you win the lottery, if someone assassinates you, they can claim your prize. So it's a wild premise, and like I was really looking forward to it, but then like after watching the movie, I was like, oh, this is not as great as I wanted it to be.
Yeah, it's always, there sometimes you see the movies like that where it's like, okay, this is a really good premise, let's see how they pull it off with the execution, and it doesn't always work out, unfortunately. That's why I feel like sometimes, it's like, do a movie like The Rundown, where it's just like a guy has to go to the jungle and get somebody back. It's hard to mess that up, and that's why I appreciate this one. A big reason why I appreciate this one.
Nice.
But Mitch, thank you so much for coming on. Anything else you want to like shout the people out to the people before we wrap up here?
Oh, well, just thanks for reaching out again, Derek. This has been great. Like, are you going to Comic-Con this year?
I am, yeah. I'll be back there again this year, so we're looking forward.
Nice. Yeah, so we'll run into each other. We'll grab a drink again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just shout out to all the friends that are in the Comic-Con group. You know who you are.
Yeah.
Like, I've been fortunate, like, because my first Comic-Con wasn't until 2020. That was my first Comic-Con, and that was like the special edition,
right.
Because we had COVID going on. But like the people that I've met through that, including yourself, it's been a great community. You guys are the reason like I go back and hang out as much as I do. Shout out to my wife, who puts up with my nonsense. And just thank you to all the people that still show love, because The Good Place, it's been a while since The Good Place, and I still get people coming up to me and showing support, showing love. So I appreciate that. I may be awkward around it because I'm trying to get used to it. It's still a little weird for me, but I do love it when people show love for the show love for the character.
Yeah, I love your Instagram bio, which is Donkey Doug on The Good Place, Donkey Doug IRL. I thought that was pretty great. But yeah, man,
it's pretty much like it's typecast. I got typecasted.
But yeah, man, it was a blast at Comic-Con. We both had panels. It was a really good time. We had somebody who was on the same panel as both of us, and that's a really, really great community, like you're saying. So, looking forward to going back this year and getting to hang out with those people. And just to everybody who was listening, I also want to say thank you guys. The show is a labor of love. And if anybody out there, if you can want to give the show a follow, Underrated Movie Podcast everywhere. If you want to give it 5 stars, however you're listening to this, it means a lot. I also got a Patreon for starting as low as $1 a month that you can sign up for. But you don't want to do that. Honestly, just that rating means so much. Or just go to underratedmoviepodcast.com to find all that stuff. And yeah, Mitch, one more time, thank you for coming on. This was an absolute blast.
Oh yeah, thank you, man. And if you guys haven't, go in the backlog of the Underrated Podcast. There was a couple gems in there that I had forgotten about. I was like, oh yeah, that is pretty underrated. So that's fun. So like, go check out past episodes. Like Derek is doing good stuff.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you guys all next time.
Yeah.